Communicative approach. Now, communicative approach is slightly different from the grammatical approach used in bilingual education because it says that language is learned in meaningful contexts. It talks about a co-construction of knowledge, and it focuses on giving comprehensible input to the learners so that they can engage in conversations and can understand the language input to use it later on. There are two main forms of communicative approach which might be used in bilingual education. The first one is the immersion method, and the second one is integrated content-based instruction. Now, what is the immersion method? The immersion method or immersion use of language is about using a specific language but simplifying the language while that is being used to teach a specific context. So language is essentially contextualized, it is simplified, the delivery of the time of the language is slowed down, and deliberately vocabulary is broken down into simpler words. And although the focus is on the teaching of the content itself, yet language objectives and content objectives are prepared concurrently. So when a teacher prepares a lesson, for instance, she focuses on what are the key features of language that are needed to be taught so that this content might be comprehensible to the learners. So the focus is on the content, but the language in its supportive role is also paid attention to in the planning of the lesson. Now, it is argued that the immersion method is very useful for the revitalization of language. So, although immersion use might be used not just for content, but also the purpose might be to revitalize a language, and as we discussed it earlier also, this method is useful for revitalization of language because sometimes when a minority language is used with a dominant language, it actually leads to a shift towards the dominant language, and the children might actually lose their minority language and make a shift towards the dominant language. So if no other language is used, immersion method is used, and minority language is used to teach a subject, then it might help in the revitalization of a language. Now, this method is often used in immigrant educational contexts. So, and in these contexts also, the focus is on the meaningful input of a subject in a specific given language. So, because it is a possibility that when you are using this immersion method, we are not using any other language but the language that has been allocated to the given subject, then we try to slow down the process of teaching and learning. So as we said earlier, not only the delivery of the lesson is also slowed down, but there are certain opportunities for interaction that are given to the students. And when a question is asked from a student, the teacher increases the wait time for the answer to be given by the student, because we do understand that if a student is thinking to respond to a question related to a content, and when we restrict the student not to use any other language but the language allocated to that subject, then the student is actually engaged in complex cognitive processes. He or she is focusing on giving the answer to the content as well as compiling the right language to give the answer in. So all these features are carefully planned, and language is connected with language use is connected with students' background in terms of their proficiency. When we come to content-based learning, then the key integrated content-based learning, then we can say that this is an adaptation of immersion. Several features of immersion method also appear over here. However, the focus is less on content teaching, but it is more on developing literacy in a given language. So although content and language are being taught simultaneously, yet more focus is on the teaching of the language itself. And language teachers rather than subject teachers are engaged in this type of method. And they can use strategies like pre-teaching vocabulary that will come in the content, drawing attention to certain high-frequency academic words that might emerge in the text again and again. They might also draw attention to subject-specific or discipline-specific vocabulary or the register of that kind of discipline. But the focus essentially is on literacy and language.